Coming in at number 10 is Stargate, which was also sold under the name Defender 2. It's a game where you have to protect people from being abducted by aliens. When they go to pick up a citizen, you have to run to their rescue, shoot the ship that's hauling them upward toward the sky, and then catch them and land them. You have to go across the landscape back and forth and just fend off the abductions until you reach the next stage. Unlike most of the other games on this list, this is a game I've only been playing for about a week, and I don't know why I waited so long, because this is an incredible version of the arcade game. The controls are spot on, the animation is smooth. It was one of the later releases that people probably missed. I want to point out that these are my top 10 favorite Atari 2600 games. This is not a list of the top 10 best Atari 2600 games of all time. Everyone has different preferences, so if this list doesn't correspond to your expectations, that's fine. There's plenty of lists out there on the internet, on Watch Mojo and stuff like that. Coming in at number 9 is Turmoil. This is a game made by 20th Century Fox, and it's basically a flat version of Tempest. It's a surprisingly fast-paced game on a system known for things that move a lot more slower. You have that middle lane there, and you can shoot both ways. You have these glowing vaginas that appear on the end of those rows occasionally, and you have to go touch it to prevent it from becoming a more powerful enemy. This reminds me of a mobile game you might see produced today. Of course, this was decades before people even had the notion of a portable phone. It's just fun to sit around going up and down that road to shoot things. It's not a perfect game. The stages do tend to drag out quite a bit. The gameplay is what gets it into this top 10. Let me give you a little bit of background as far as my Atari experience. I grew up with an Atari in the household. I think we got it in 1981, right when Space Invaders was taking off, and I pretty much played it all the way up to the NES era, and even during the NES era, I still played quite a bit of it. Most of these games you see today, all except for two, are ones that I had a lot of experience playing back then, and they're ones that I feel still hold up today. What I like to do with these top 10 lists is mix some honorable mentions in with the entire list, and that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to have 3, and this is one of them, and that is Enduro. You can probably tell why I like this game just by looking at it. It has graphics that are way better than most Atari 2600 games. You can instantly tell it's a racing game. Unlike most racing games on the 2600, there's a lot of change in the scenery. You start off racing in the daylight, but it gets to nighttime and people have their headlights on. It also snows, and the sound of the game actually gets muffled from the snow. It's actually pretty cool. And then there's a foggy part. Eventually you reach daylight again, and then you cycle through all those things. It's all about speed and dodging. You have to apply the right amount of speed that gives you the right amount of reaction time. Anyway, it's a racing game with a lot of strategy, and it has great graphics, and that's why it's an honorable mention. Number 8 is Joust. If you've ever played Flappy Bird, the controls of this game are pretty much the same as that. You have to keep hitting the button on the controller to keep yourself afloat. And what you're trying to do is knock the other guys off their flying ostriches. So you have to make contact with them, be on a higher level on the screen. It's the same concept as Balloon Fight on the NES. After you knock the guys off, they turn into an egg, and then you have to gather the egg, or else another bad guy grows out of it. You'll die if they make contact with you at a higher level. You can also die if you run into the lava. There's also a pterodactyl that comes out and chases you. You have control over the speed in which you're flying. There's also some ricochets that can happen if you hit your head on the platforms, and those can get you killed if they bounce you into an enemy. It's a very cool concept and a very original game that's different from everything else on the 2600. Number 7 is Demon Attack. I think most people who have played the 2600 have played this game at some point in time. It sold a lot of units. It's a classic space shooter, one of many on the system. But what makes this one so great is the enemies are weird and they keep changing. Sometimes they look like pretzels. Sometimes they look like monkeys. Some of them break into two and become these tiny little birds who can dive bomb you, basically. The sounds to this game give it a creepiness. That's what's cool about the 2600. Because of the crudeness of the hardware, you get these really original sounds. I'm terrible at this game, but I still love playing it because I like to see all the different looking aliens. I've never been able to see them all. Number 6 is a classic. It is Ms. Pac-Man. This is just a sweet and gentle game. The color palette, the speed, the sound effects, the little bits of music, it comes together nicely. And when you compare it to the Pac-Man game that came out in 1982 on the 2600, it blows it away. It has all the features of the hit arcade game, including different mazes and different kinds of fruit and stuff like that. I don't think I need to explain this game much further because it's one that everyone is familiar with, and you can't go wrong with this version of it. Now for my second of 3 honorable mentions. This one is going to be a surprise for you. It is video chess. Playing chess on a 2600 is akin to playing Doom on a toaster. It should not be happening. The computer plays in a smart way, and it almost beats me every single time. It knows when to go on defense, it knows when to go on offense. I cannot believe this is running on the 2600. If you're interested in knowing how they were able to program this game and a lot of the other games, I'm going to recommend this book. They have not paid me to promote it. I bought it with my own money. But it's called the Atari 2600/7800, a visual compendium. And there is a section that talks about how they programmed video chess. They had to use a technique called Venetian blinds. It was also the first game to use bank switching ROMs. But anyway, whenever I'm in a 2600 mood, I tend to grab video chess, and the whole time I'm just marveling at it. Number 5 is Centipede. It's basically a space shooter where you're shooting bugs and you're shooting blocks that are supposed to be mushrooms. Yes, it doesn't look as good as the arcade version of it, but it still plays just like it. It's fantastic to play. You have to decide what you want to pay attention to. Do you want to attack the centipede? Do you want to get the spider out of the way? Do you want to try to get that flea that's coming down? Or do you want to shoot that scorpion before it's able to poison the mushrooms? It's very cool how in this game you can move up and down in addition to left and right. You can't go all the way up. That just gives it a different feel. I know there's some other games on the 2600 that do that, but a lot of them don't. I actually do like this better than Millipede. Millipede has a little bit too much going on. I like Centipede mainly because the difficulty is right where I need it to be for myself, and I always keep track of my high scores in this game. Speaking of high scores, let me show you what I have right here. It is an old Pac-Man notebook, or Trapper Keeper, or whatever you call these things. And inside of it, I have some sheets I made in Excel that hold my high scores for certain 2600 games. I have a column for the date, I have a column for the variation number, I have 2 columns indicating what difficulty levels I'm using, A or B. Having a score log like this makes the experience better for a lot of these games. It gives you motivation to go back and play them to try to top your old score. So we are heading to number 4 next, and that is River Raid. This was programmed by a female programmer. Her name was Carol Shaw, and she had a master's in computer science. As soon as she got that degree, she got a job at Atari, but then she left for Activision, and that's where she created this gem that you see in front of you. Just look at this game. It is a scrolling shooter, and wow, there's a lot of enemy variety. There's ships that are parked, there's ships that are moving, there's jets that are going across the screen, there's bridges in the way, which for some reason you can't fly over, even though you're a plane. There's fuel tanks, which you can either destroy for points, or you can run over them and get some gas in your tank. It's as fun as it looks, and it should be in every type of video game Hall of Fame. Time for my last honorable mention, and that is Vanguard. This is another game that I only recently started playing, and it's a shame. If I would have played this in the 80s, my mind would have been blown, and I probably would have played it like every day. Like River Raid, it's a scrolling shooter. There's lots of different stages with different scenery and different principles going on. Sometimes you're going to the right, sometimes you're going up, sometimes you're going down. There's even a boss fight. And once you beat the boss, you start cycling through the stages again, except they're harder. You could shoot in 4 different directions, and when you're not shooting, you move faster, so there's strategy in the game. You can grab these little E symbols and become invincible for a little bit and ram into everything. But like I said, I've only been playing it recently, so I need time to think about this game, but I'm pretty sure this is a top tier 2600 game. These last 3, I play again and again. I consider them timeless. Number 3 is Junior Pac-Man. I believe that this blows the other 2 Pac-Man games on the 2600 out of the water. It's like the natural evolution of a Pac-Man game. You go from having a static screen to one that scrolls and has a lot more dots in it. And it's faster than the other games. And it's much harder. It's one of the hardest 2600 games in my opinion. Instead of the usual fruit that you eat, there's like little bicycles and stuff that hop around the board. They actually make the dots bigger, which slows you down. It gives you extra incentive to eat those things whenever you hear them bouncing around on the screen. There's different mazes in this game, but since it's so hard, you're not going to see very many of them. You can use the game select options to pick different mazes to start as stage 1. It is just a well-programmed, very fun to play game. If you played a 2600 at all and you haven't played this, you need to get around to it. Okay, time for number 2, and that is Missile Command. Missile Command is one of the best ports of an arcade game on the 2600. All you're doing is moving a cursor along the screen, and occasionally you're firing a missile that explodes in front of incoming missiles. You have to defend your 6 cities down below, as well as the ammo pile that's in the middle of the screen there. Every stage has a different color, and the missiles coming down get faster and faster. There's these little bombs that come down as well. It eventually gets very fast and hard to keep up with the incoming missiles, and that's what I love about this game. You really have to get in a zone to get good at it. It's all about timing. Every time you press the fire button, it takes a little bit before the missile reaches your cursor, and there's timing to the explosion that results. There's so much strategy. I've never stopped playing this game ever since I got it in the early 80s. My number 1 is very, very far above number 2. It's one that most people don't think of as a number 1 game for the 2600, but for me, there's no doubt about it. It is called Mega Mania, parentheses, a space nightmare. What it means by a space nightmare is that you're dreaming all this. The things you're shooting are not your typical space shooter type things. They are hamburgers, they are bugs, they are diamonds, they are irons, they are cookies, they are tires, they are bow ties, they are dice. What makes this game so good is the variety of the enemies and the variety in which the enemies move. Take, for instance, the cookies. The first time you encounter them, they move like this. The next time you encounter them, they move like this. And then they move like this. Being able to withstand those cookies crashing down and shooting your way through them, it's just fun to attempt. It's so much better than Space Invaders, where you basically have the same pattern over and over again. You shoot all the invaders, then they come, they might be faster or whatever, but they're moving the same way. Same with Demon Attack, they kind of move the same way. I should also mention the controls. On its default setting, you're using guided missiles. It's so precise that if you get good at the game, you can wipe out the whole entire wave in about 10 seconds. Activision was one of the best publishers for the Atari 2600, and I think Mega Mania is their crowning achievement. Of course, your top 10 2600 games might differ from mine, and I want to see them in the comments. You don't have to number them if you don't want to, but you could. If you would like to see another top 10 list, I did one for this top 10 Sega Genesis games, and it's on the screen right there. May your games make you happy and smart, and may people respect you for playing them. So long, everybody.